So first of all, Dr. Flanagan, welcome.
Thank you, Gina.
I'm going to jump right in. Sports CEO, also a doctor. What's up with that?
I had a career change.
Okay.
I was listening to Thea talk just there about how the Irish aren't brilliant at self-promoting, but we're getting better at it. And I think I was quite slow to work out what I wanted to do in my life. And I was, I suppose, just going through the academic process, and I stayed in the process as long as I could because it suited me and I was good at it and I kept getting scholarships. But I didn't really have a clear idea of what I wanted to do, and I ended up doing a PhD almost because I couldn't think of anything better to do. And I was just very fortunate that when I came out with a PhD that it was around the time that sports organizations in Europe were becoming more like businesses and were open to the idea of people coming in with PhDs and MBAs. And there were beginning to be some openings in sports, so I was lucky in terms of my timing.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about that then. May I call you Ian?
Of course,
okay,
Gina.
Ian, we're on a first name basis now. What is the link between business and sports that some might not be aware of and that you were so lucky to have that timing of at the time?
Look, sport is one of the biggest business segments in the world. It's a global business. Every country in the world plays sport, pretty much plays professional sport, and literally the bit that's been missing is the development of clubs, especially as off-pitch business units, and that's the big bit now that clubs are essentially playing catch-up on. That's the area that they've neglected for a long time. And that's the area where there's lots of opportunities and lots of career opportunities opening up.
Okay, and so you've been the CEO of Munster Rugby for now the past 4 months.
4 months.
Woohoo! Talk about, I want to hear what you're doing in Munster because, of course, we are here in Munster. But tell me about your first foray into the business of sport.
I think this is pretty much a lesson. Out there, I went and knocked on a door, and no one's going to come and give you a job.
Excellent.
And essentially, and this will give you an idea of how long ago this was. It wasn't even an email. I sent an old-fashioned letter to someone.
What is that?
And luckily enough, that guy got back to me. I got the opportunity of an internship at a big London sports agency, and within 6 months, I'd gone from tutoring smart students in a 15th century cottage in Oxford, and then suddenly I was on a plane with David Beckham and I was representing the England football team.
Now see, why do people do this? There wasn't a suddenly. You knocked on a door for what? And then how did you get to be doing stuff with David Beckham? Please give us a little more detail.
Okay, so essentially, I got a job with a company that was growing quickly. And again,
what was it, and why were you interested in it, and why did you send that letter?
I worked out that the only thing I wanted to do in my life was to watch sport for free.
Right on. See?
Yeah,
yes, give him a round of applause for this.
And
I'm gonna stop you for a second, Ian. When you're sitting out there, I find this all the time. I'm listening to some great successful person. They have this really cool title, and then they go, and then I was here, and then I was there. And I'm like, wait, what happened in the middle? I took my business from €5 in my pocket to $2,500 million. Wait, how did that happen? You had a desire.
Yeah, well, I also broke it down to the lowest common denominator. What did I want? And pure and simple, if I could get that, I would be happy.
Right on. And so you identified, what was that first letter you sent?
So it was, there was only one guy in the world then who was talking about sports clubs as brands.
Okay.
And he'd written a couple of books on Manchester United as a brand, and he'd written a book on Arsenal and Spurs as businesses. And I wrote him a letter and saying, I think like you think. I don't know anyone else who thinks like this. And I think that football clubs and sports clubs should be open to the idea of clever people coming in to work in them as a business. And he said, I agree with you, but he said the clubs are a bit old-fashioned. If I was you, I'd go and work with an agency, work across a number of sports, get experience, and then decide where you want to end up. And he put me in touch with a big London agency that was growing quickly, had a lot of investment capital, represented the England football team, England rugby team, a lot of Formula One drivers, a lot of Ryder Cup golfers, some Olympians, a couple of opera singers, some actors, some writers, and it was pretty much the biggest talent agency in Europe.
Okay.
And
I want to stop you for just one
Sure.
second. Here's why. Lesson for you out there. How old were you at the time you wrote that letter, more or less?
I was 29.
Okay, 29. So 29. He was really old even then. No. When you're 19, when you're 18, if you don't have a LinkedIn profile right now, that's a mistake. Get on LinkedIn. I don't care about your TikToks. I don't care about your Twitter. I don't care about, well, Twitter to a degree. I don't certainly care about all your makeup over on Instagram. But unless you want to be in the fashion industry or fashion business. But if you want to, LinkedIn is the equivalent of a business letter today.
It certainly is.
And you can ask anyone for advice. And it sounds like that's what you did initially.
That is what I did, and I'm always very open because it worked for me, and I'm always very open to students, to secondary school students, to university students, reaching out, trying to grow their network, because that's how I got my break. And,
Yes.
and I always accept invitations on LinkedIn, and I always try to meet people and offer my thoughts if I can.
It's not too soon to start this
No,
this
not at all.
networking building. And someone's not too lofty to reach out to.
Life is networking.
Nice. Life is networking. Write that down. When you began then with the agency, now pick up the story.
I was given a job, my first day in the job, the British government. I know we're dealing with the coronavirus now, and it's a bump in the road.
Do you see it as a bump in the road?
Yes, I do, because however bad it gets, we'll be here next year for Cubs, the year after. We'll hopefully be playing games next year, the year after, and things will go on. But what I mean by a bump in the road is that business, well, sport, but business is always a bump in the road, that there is always something that will happen that is unexpected, and you need to be prepared for it, you need to be resilient, and you need to be able to just, not be overwhelmed by it and just get on with it. So to give you an example, when I joined that London agency, the British government announced a ban on tobacco sponsorship. Now, most people here are too young to remember what that was, but when we were growing up, all the Formula One cars used to have Marlboro Lights and John Player Special, and all the cigarette brands, all the snooker tournaments had tobacco sponsorship.
Right.
So we represented 6 of the Formula One teams. We represented all the Formula One drivers. So my first day in the job, we had a crisis meeting, and the Formula One teams were all there, and they said, okay, we're losing 250 million quid. Where's that 250 million quid's worth of sponsorship coming from next year? And everyone turned and looked at me, and I was like the last guy in the room. and they said, no, this is our new guy. He's head of Insight.
He's got great ideas.
Yeah.
Did they just give you that title on the spot?
head of Insight. And, and that became my role.
Did you have an answer at that point, Ian, or did you want to walk back out the door?
Yeah, but that's in rugby now we call it a hospital pass. Your life will always be a succession of hospital passes, and it's how you adapt and how you cope with it.
And Professor O'Halloran talked about the ability to be adaptable and agile.
No, and that would be that would be the key thing I would say to people. You have to be adaptable. That when I hire people today, I never hire them for the job as it is today, because that job will change beyond recognition in 2 or 3 years. Most of the jobs that you're going to be applying for probably don't even exist yet. So, of course, you have to be adaptable, because everything is changing faster and faster year on year. And believe it or not, it turned out what was coming over the hill for the Formula One teams was mobile phone companies.
Aha.
And we found 250 million quid worth of sponsorship in mobile phones. Then we found the semiconductor industry. And if you ask me now, I couldn't tell you what a semiconductor is, but back then they paid us 250 million quid to sponsor Formula One. And, and that was how we got through it.
Seeing the opportunity within a bump in the road is really important.
It is. So I've had probably 30 different jobs in 20 years in sport, but it's always been the same job as well.
Interesting. What's that cohesiveness? What is that?
My job has always been to find the new money. And that is a case of somewhere out there in the world, whether it's in Asia, in China, in India, there are going to be brands that we've never heard of. In 2 years' time, there'll be a big global brand. And they will want to use sports to market their products, to find consumers and to find their audiences. Equally, sports are going from Europe, from the US, to new parts of the world, to new territories, finding new audiences. We want to know, who the big brands are in those countries that no one knows about in this part of the world. So my job has always been like that. It's to find the new money that's going to come into sport and to find it before other companies, other brands, other sports do, and bring it to my sport or to my club. And that's essentially the kind of common link.
That's great. And when we're talking about the future and the brands that might be coming down the line, and also about your ability to chart your own path and to try to do bold things when it comes to networking, we actually got a bold question. Yay, Quiva in the audience. Shout out to you, for you. She says, what would you say to someone who would want to replace you in the future? What would be their best path? Here, free strategy to your future replacement, Ian.
Oh, God. Well, I'm eminently replaceable.
Why is that?
Well, I think...
We all have a career life, right?
We do. No, I've only been here 4 months, so hopefully I'll
don't replace him quite yet.
I'll get to stay and do some of the things I want to do before I move on. But no, but it's a very real point when we talk about artificial intelligence. We talk about the jobs that are going to be replaced and made redundant by technology and so on. In terms of what jobs will be there in the future, the jobs that will last. Actually, I think in sport, especially, particularly on the commercial side of sport,
yes,
where we're talking about relationships, we're talking about interpersonal relationships, networking. The sheer, at its basic level, if people have an empathy with you, actually like going out for dinner with you, that just makes everything so much more possible. And that is fundamentally how a lot of our business still works.
I think that is true. This is a point to actually underline as well. People want to do business with people they like. Business relationships are relationships. There's no such thing really as a personal life and a professional life. We just have a life. And the more that we can get deliberate about how we connect, what are some of the things that you would encourage the students to do to make sure they understand that they're not just an academic, but they're also reaching out and networking? I asked Dr. Thea Hennessy, Professor Thea Hennessy, about her recommendations for students. What would be some of your recommendations you would make for them to start today?
I would echo what Thea said about extracurricular activity. I mean, I didn't realize it at the time when I was at UCC. I invested an awful lot of, again, I use that term now advisedly. I invested at the time. I was bunking off in the library. I put an awful lot of time into society life. I ran a couple of societies. I was very busy with the ENTS committee. And
what did that give to you? Did that give you a meeting of other like-minded people, meeting the professors at a different level? What does that do? Why join? Why be not only in a society, but actually run them?
There was certainly that element, but I think more pertinently, we were running the budget for that society, and in particular was the English Literature Society, but, we were booking speakers to come, we were putting on events, we were promoting events, once a month or twice a month. We were taking guest speakers out for dinner, we were organizing a conference, and, and it's only in hindsight I look back now, and, that's 20 or 25 years ago or more now. And, a lot of the things we were doing as students, fundamentally, there was no difference between what I was doing then and then, when I was running a football club, and we were putting on match days for 40 or 45,000 people.
But see, isn't that an important point? What you're doing in these smaller society dinners and events is replicated at maybe a larger scale, but ultimately...
No, it's exactly the same thing. And I wish it hadn't taken me so long to realize, that I always had an entrepreneurial side.
Yes.
So there was that element. I mean, I was always bunking off. I needed to pay the bills when I was a student, and there used to be a nightclub which doesn't exist anymore called Sir Henry's, and I used DJ there once a week. And
even I have heard of this.
Yeah,
it's a mythical place.
It is, and but I'd bring my box of records, and old money and DJ, and then carry them home in a taxi, and just to pay the bills. But just that whole thing of organizing a nightclub night, getting flyers done, going around the bars, selling it, and taking that financial risk myself. And if I'd had half a brain, younger, I would have realized, that this is where my future lay, rather than spending another 5 or 6 years trying to work it out. But it makes more sense looking back retrospectively now than it did when I was doing it, if that makes sense.
It does. So talk a little bit about the projects that you're excited about now that you're in with Munster, with the rugby. What are you excited about as the CEO?
It's my first full-time rugby job. I've obviously worked with the England team when they won the World Cup.
Well, that's not an aside. That's kind of a cool thing.
It is a cool thing, and I did a lot of big rugby sponsorship deals in the past. I did all of the global stuff for DHL.
So what can we look for in Munster Rugby?
Well, I think rugby is going to change hugely in the next couple of years. It's pretty much an analog sport about to move into the digital age, and it's happening in rugby later than in any other sport, I think.
So what's that going to look like?
What's it going to look like?
Experientially from a fan.
I think the match day is probably going to be more spectator focused. I think we're probably going to see a significant amount of investment in the stadia and the product. I think the whole broadcast scenario in terms of how you view it, what it looks like as a broadcast package will probably change because that's been unchanged for a long time. But I think rugby has to make a big effort to make itself more attractive to younger demographics, younger audiences, because every sport in the world, I mean, we're not competing with the GA or soccer, and every sport is competing with video games, with Netflix, with Amazon, with those things, and that's the reality of every sport around the world. We all have a battle for hearts and minds of kids, of teenagers, so we all have to try incredibly hard, and this is a this is a cultural issue, this is a lifestyle issue as well in terms of active lifestyle, healthy lifestyle. So
what's the demographic right now mix up between e-sport fans and live rugby sports fans? Is there a drill down on that?
There isn't a huge overlap at the moment. I don't think that would be a surprise for you to hear. I mean, our core demographic is male, kind of 30 to 45. We are going to make a big push in esports. Again, rugby has never gone near anything in esports, unlike a lot of the other major sports. So that's something we're looking at seriously, and are hopefully going to announce something in that space later this year, which will be very exciting for us.
Yes. And how important are business partnerships to help move that along?
Oh, hugely important. But the whole digital arena for us, look, our big opportunity in Munster is, historically, we have always been everyone's favorite second club. Everyone knows what we are as a brand, the huge passion, the color, the vibrancy. We know we've got the most atmospheric stadium in the world. I think I've probably worked in 20 different sports down through the years. I've worked with huge global brands like Barcelona, like Man United. I've worked in the Premier League. I've worked with the Olympics. I can tell you, hand on heart for sure, what we have at Munster, 99.9% of sports clubs in the world would give their right arm to have what we have. It's authentic, it's genuine, the fan base is huge. We've got an enormous opportunity around the world with the Irish diaspora. it's a huge strategic project for us to engage with all of our fan base around the world and be relevant in their lives 365 days a year,
Yes.
which makes digital and everything we do in that space hugely important for us. And that's the big opportunity, and that will be the dial changer for us.
Excellent, Ian. We've got time for one more question. What are then the different recommendations? We talked about networking. We talked about being active in a variety of different societies to increase your awareness of how business is done and build those relationships. We also talked about the move for rugby and the opportunity, especially with Munster Rugby, to capture new fans and imaginations through esports and digital and all the businesses and those partnerships that will impact. Is there then any particular avenue for anybody interested in sport business that they should be taking right now at the college level, or thinking of what would you say if you could accelerate that career path?
I would probably say two things. A, in terms of structure, the business side of sport is only going to grow more and more in the coming years. So our data analysis sections, our commercial sections, all of those and any qualifications relevant to those areas will be useful. But above and beyond that, be adaptable. That I never hire people on the basis of what their degree is. What they've studied. It's always about the mindset of the candidate who comes through the door and what they say. I mean, for goodness sake, I studied English literature. My PhD.
His PhD's in English literature, folks.
No,
we found that behind stage.
Well, even more embarrassing than that, my PhD's in poetry.
Oh, come on. Let's hear for the poets.
No.
But that means it's your ability to tell a story. It's your ability to see a bigger picture, to bring that to relevance, isn't it?
No, absolutely. So it's about what's in your mindset, and it's how you're adaptable, and it's the job that I have available today is going to look completely different. So you have to show that you're going to be adaptable and changeable, because that's the world we're living in today.
Excellent. Those are great words to end on. You have to be adaptable and changeable, because that's the world that we're living in today. Dr. Ian Flanagan, ladies and gentlemen, students, alumni.